Welcome to the Opera Training Companion, the National Opera Studios podcast exploring how to thrive and survive in the world of opera. I'm Hannah Sandison. I'm from SWOPRA, the charity supporting women and parents in opera. I am a founder of Sound Performance Psychology, and I'm also a singer. This episode is all about parenting in opera, a journey filled with joy, chaos, sacrifice, and surprising strength. Just a brief thing about myself. I work as a singer in the industry. I work as a performance psychology consultant, and I do lots of great work for SWOPRA. I have two children, a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I would love to introduce my three fantastic guests today. We have here with us Anna Cooper, Jennifer France, and David Butt Phillips. So if just one by one I go around and just ask, where you're up to, what you're up to, and how many kids you have, and how you're feeling right now today, this morning, on this early Friday morning. Anna Cooper, lovely to see you.
Hello. So I'm Anna Cooper. I'm a mezzo, and I'm currently a hairwood artist at English National Opera, so very much an emerging artist. And I have a very sassy 3-year-old. I had a very early start. I actually had 3 children at my house last night on the hottest day. So yeah, not much sleep, but I'm here.
We're here. David.
Hi, I'm David. I'm a tenor, and I have a 5-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl, and I also struggled to sleep last night, mainly because of the heat, to be fair, not the kids, they were fine. And I have just been abroad for most of the last month, but now I'm home for most of the summer, so this is the sort of the payback bit, which is nice.
Brilliant. Jenny.
Hello, I'm Jen and I am a soprano, and I've got 2 gorgeous daughters. My eldest is 5 and about to finish reception, which is insane to me. And I've got another little one who is about 16 months old, so still about the same age as yours, actually, Hannah.
Yeah.
And I'm currently rehearsing with Opera Holland Park for my first Lucia in Lucia di Lammermoor. So it's been an interesting few weeks because obviously I'm away from home because I live in Birmingham. So I'm getting a bit more sleep than usual, but it's the heat, it's the being away from home. I still don't sleep particularly well. But I'm going home later today because I finish a bit early. So yay, train home.
Yay. And you're actually off. You're off rehearsing this afternoon. You mentioned.
Straight after this, actually, I got given a few because they're so supportive at Opera Holland Park, I've got to say. So when I said to them I'd really love to do this podcast, it's so important to me and to spread the word about all of this. They said straight away, yeah, no problem. So they've released me until 12-ish, I think. So I've got to go straight there, and then just staging the mad scene this afternoon. Just a small ditty,
Tiny
thing. But that's, I think, the one thing one of the many things that you get really good at as a parent in this opera industry is kind of splitting your mind, splitting your time, compartmentalizing everything. So I'm doing this right now. Get on the tube, then I'm Lucia in 2 hours. So
Superwoman. Wonderful. Brilliant. So we're going to talk today about our personal experiences, but we're also going to be including some experiences of some people that sent him submissions. But first of all, just a little bit, parenting in opera is undeniably tough. Touring with little ones, juggling rehearsals and family life, but it can also be uniquely rewarding. And we're here today to discuss the experiences along with other experiences of people who've sent these submissions. And we're really keen to keep this really positive and to really show everybody out there that it is absolutely possible to have children and have a career. It is undeniably difficult, but it is absolutely possible. And I think the wonderful thing about the podcast and about things like this and having you lovely people here is that we get to discuss that and show the younger generations in perhaps a way that we weren't necessarily shown that it is possible and the support is there. So first of all, I'm just going to read a little quote from one of our lovely submissions. This is just straight into the deep end with the title of guilt. So being a parent who works in opera has its challenges, lots of missed bedtimes, an erratic schedule, and long periods of absence whilst working on productions have put their strain on family life and definitely created a huge guilt that I carry around. Having to work on a child's birthday is awful. Missing family celebration feels terrible, as does parenting through FaceTime or hearing about a child being poorly while you're away and you can't give them a hug. So having said, we're going to keep this really positive. I think it is important that we also mention a couple of the realities, and guilt is certainly one of them. I've currently been away for a couple of weeks, had a show last night. I'm working with Wild Arts at the moment, who have been fantastic. But it's a real thing. It is, seeing other people doing those routine things, the pickups, the bedtimes, doing the FaceTime thing. I see you all nodding. Any particular thoughts come to mind regarding that?
Well, I just don't know how people did this before we had video phones, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know people did, but I'm so grateful that we have that technology, because
Before even mobile
Yeah,
phones, before even being able to call, like, people did this when you had to, like, when they were abroad 40 years ago, 50 years ago, they had to, if you wanted to call home from another country, sometimes you had to book it in advance,
Yeah.
basically, like, because they didn't even have a mobile phone, let alone a video phone,
Yeah, it is really useful, I think, and for the children as well. I mean, I know that my little one, only being one, she can't really talk to me on the phone, but I think they're growing up in this world of technology as well anyway. And I think it's just a really useful thing. I mean, she recognizes several people. She's used to speaking to family members from all over the world. We've got a lot of family in Canada, for example, we don't see. And then with my eldest, it's really, really important. For example, last night, because I'm away from home, she'd made a rather big mess in her bedroom. And my husband was trying to put the baby to sleep. It was bedtime. So, I was on FaceTime with her and kind of made a game up with her, like, because 5-year-olds, the best way to get them to do any tidying up is to make it a race.
Yeah.
So, I was like, I was timing her, and I was like overseeing her tidying up her room, which was not only a lovely connecting moment for me and her, but also a help for my husband as well, because he then finished with the baby and half her room was already tidy. So it's really useful.
Yeah.
Really useful.
It's a fantastic thing. But again, on the flip side of that is, my parents were singers, and I remember them, not so much actually being away all the time, but having that thing where they call. I sometimes find, I don't know about you, that perhaps I shouldn't be sort of interrupting the process. So, for example, a couple of nights ago, my 5-year-old, I wanted to have a chat with her. I missed her, and I knew she was missing me, but I didn't want my 1-year-old to see me because I knew that she'd flip out. So, sort of balancing that. Anna, I mean, you're a Harwood artist at ENO, so perhaps you're more local.
Yeah.
Does that really help things with you? Where are you based exactly?
Yeah, I'm based in London.
Yeah.
At the moment, things are really, really great having a child and being in London, and I've got quite a regular schedule. But yeah, I think I've been away, and that guilt thing. I also feel like we should flip it and say, look, this is also amazing for them to see what their parents are doing and to experience it. So don't feel guilty, even though we do. And it does mean that there are other times in the day that we're around, and like you say, you've got the summer off with her, which is
David,
amazing.
This is wonderful. You've got how many? I mean, how long?
No, this is,
till
it's
September?
really amazing.
Somebody
Like
9 to 5 would not get to
No.
see
This
their
is the
children
thing.
like
And
that.
even if you were in, so I have a lot of friends that are in, for example, full-time choruses or have full-time fest contracts in Germany. And that's great because you're always working in the same house.
Yeah.
But the hours are crazy.
Yeah. It
And
gives you
so-
flexibility.
Yeah, right. And so what I have is, yes, I regularly go away for a month or even 2 months in one go. But the flip side of that is I do get long periods where I don't work at all, and which other people don't get. Like I've been in the whole of the in the whole of the school summer holidays this year, I've got one concert and nothing else. So I've basically got the entire, and that's in London. So I've basically got the entire summer holidays off. And my wife's a school teacher, so she's got the entire summer holidays off as well.
Yeah.
So we've basically got 2 months, more or less, where neither of us has to work.
Yeah.
And that is an amazing gift. And my parents never had that, even though they had much more family-friendly careers than I have. But that, you try and, like you say, focus on the positives.
Yeah.
And, you know, we get to
Yeah.
do a lot of stuff together and go on holidays together. And they get to travel with me sometimes. It depends on where it is and the schedule and everything. But for example, we just had half term in Prague together, all of us, which was fantastic. So, you know, you've got to keep focused on the positives, definitely.
Yeah. And I think just to sort of counteract this idea of guilt, I think that is a natural part of parenting. It's biological a lot of the time.
Of course. Yeah.
But also, you know, to really drive home that we trained a very, very long time and worked incredibly hard for what we've achieved. And that it's really important to recognize that whilst that's always going to be there, you know, it's that sort of saying, happy parent, happy child. It's really important that we feed ourselves creatively. We have some form of autonomy in our lives, feelings of competence, and having that social aspect as well outside of parenting. That's certainly a topic that comes up very much when I discuss guilt. And also this idea that, you know, there's a difference between physical absence and emotional absence. And I think it's really fantastic that, you know, we have these tools and we have the FaceTime, we have the ability to have the time off and check in all the time. Because if my daughter believes that I'm thinking about her all the time when I'm away and I miss her and I wish she was there, then that is that sort
They
of
feel it.
anchor.
Yeah,
they
they
feel
feel
it.
it.
And making sure that you're always reinforcing that is just so important.
Well, and going back to your point as well, David, that like when we're home, we are home.
Yeah.
You know,
Very
I've got loads of friends because now my eldest is at school. I've got this wonderful support and community around me of the other parents, which I haven't had before, and it is incredible actually. But you know, I've got loads of friends, you know, also mums and dads at the school, and they all have quote unquote normal jobs, and think that what I do is kind of very exotic and crazy and fabulous, and of course it is. But the difference I see is that yes, it's very hard being away, and some people just really don't understand that as a
How you could do it.
how you could possibly be away from your kids. But what I always say to them is, well, but when I am home, I'm 100% present with them. And as I said, we are always on the end of a video call. And you know, I think people who are working 9 to 5, not necessarily in jobs that they love, you can't forget that what we do is not just a job. It's a passion. It's something, as you said, it feeds us creatively. And I really, really, really believe that doing this job makes me a better parent. Because you know, you get this output, you get to do something that you absolutely love, and then you get to, when you are home, you get to throw yourself back into family life. And I think it really does make me a better mum, makes me more present.
It's all they've known.
Yeah.
So they are used to it.
Yeah.
And there's something that makes them very resilient to, you know, being with grandparents, being with friends. The amount of times I've chucked my baby with someone, like a family member or a friend. But it's amazing because their social skills, you know, they're very comfortable with lots of people. And we have to remember that it's normal to them.
Yeah. They don't know anything else.
I think that with the guilt thing, in my personal experience, I can't really speak for anyone else, but I do think it is a little bit different for dads than it is for mums.
Yeah.
I feel it's easier for me to compartmentalize. And in fact, in terms of guilt, which is not a word that I like to use, but it's in terms of what I feel when I'm working away for a long time, the guilt that I feel is for my wife, not for the kids. The kids are fine. We have great childcare arrangements. We're very lucky in lots of ways. They're happy at their school, that, you know, and as you say, if I was doing a 9 to 5 job in the centre of London, I wouldn't be able to do the school drop off or pick up anyway. So in that sense, I don't necessarily feel so much guilt about missing out on them. The guilt that I feel is about the burden that I leave with my wife when I go away,
The
Yeah.
mental load.
exactly, who has a stressful full-time job
Mm.
and then is effectively a single parent in all of her spare time when I'm away. That's that I do
Yeah.
feel guilty about.
Yeah, and it's something that I speak with my husband about often. Is that I think sometimes he feels that our lives are just so different. You know,
Yeah,
when I'm away,
that's what my
of
wife
course, yeah,
feels.
exactly. He completely understands, and because he used to be a singer as well, he's now an electrician. So he understands the job, but I think it is difficult, and this is what I feel the most guilty about as well. That of course I'm working very hard. You know, this job is not easy, especially if you're, doing a really big role and it's really taxing, like mentally, vocally, physically, all of that. But then, when you are away, you don't have to do all of the mundane stuff, whereas my husband's working super hard as well, and then has to go and pick up the kids
Yeah,
and do the dinner
it's
and do
really
the
tough.
tidying up and do bedtime
And not
then,
being able to
yeah,
help with
no
any of
downtime.
that logistical stuff at
Yeah.
all when you're away is really tough.
And often with
you
no
can-
other adults to talk to.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what my wife really struggles with, I think. And you can say, I'm here to help in whatever way I
Yeah.
can, and I can, in some cases, throw money at the problem and
Yeah.
sort things out. And I can speak to them on the phone and I can speak to them on FaceTime, but I'm not there.
Yeah.
She has to do the actual stuff
Mhm.
around the house to do with the kids, and then at the weekends,
Yeah.
instead of getting any downtime,
Yeah.
she's just looking after the kids.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's tough.
It's absolutely taxing. But then, as you say, as we've already mentioned, there's the flip side where the children get both parents for a long period.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
there's the
Yeah.
payoff there. We've touched on a couple of things that I wanted to talk about anyway. Obviously the sort of the emotional toll of sort of being away, but also the physical tolls of singing. I know that, going through pregnancy and the physical tolls is a question that I get a lot in the context of one-to-one sessions psychologically, but also as part of my work with Swapra. One of the big questions for people who are considering having children or are pregnant is my voice going to change? What is this going to do to my body, anatomically? If I have a vaginal birth versus a cesarean, I personally have had both. My first was a vaginal birth, my second was a cesarean, and they were both very different. So this notion of how does this affect the body, and forgive us, David.
No, it's fine.
As singers, my personal experience, and this is very personal to me, was that I sang quite quickly after both. I was very lucky in that things went quite smoothly, things went quite well. But one thing to drive home, I think, specifically to anybody who is contemplating this or is going to do this, is that there is absolutely no pressure. Take a year off, take 2 years off. I do think that there's this idea emotionally of being on a treadmill, being on a hamster wheel, and thinking, especially if you think I'm on a roll, or if I do this, or I have a contract in the diary that's due to start, a month after I give birth, what do I do? Is that we are living in a world now where I think companies are far more susceptible to those discussions. And certainly I feel that I've been supported by people, by concert bookers, by people like that. But I had, a fairly decent ride. I did a concert at 9 weeks postpartum with my first, and I did a concert abroad 8 weeks postpartum with my second. Jenny, we were talking a little earlier that you worked quite quickly after your.
I did. Again,
birth.
I was one of those really, really lucky people. I know it doesn't go so well for everybody, but I had two pretty easy as pregnancy can be, because we all know those last few months are not fun for anyone. But I had two good pregnancies. I had two really beautiful births. My first daughter was actually born in May 2020. So in that first lockdown, I did do a concert at Hot Holland Park. They did this lovely kind of outdoor.
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
remember? Yeah.
I was there.
And
yeah.
she was, I think, 8 or 9 weeks old.
remember, yeah.
Yeah, I brought her along, which is, I've got these beautiful photos of breastfeeding her between arias backstage, which I'll never forget. But then I basically didn't work for a year, to be honest, because the world shut, our industry shut down. And that was actually really lovely.
Yes.
it was really lovely. But also psychologically, I think in hindsight, quite damaging to me personally, because I'd had this baby, I was working out who I was now as a person, and then I suddenly had to think about becoming a singer again as well, which was quite hard. Again, going back to Opera Holland Park, you'll hear me talk about them a lot because I just think they're a fantastic, the most family-friendly company. My first proper opera was with Opera Holland Park, singing Cunning Little Vixen in 2021. So my daughter had just turned 1. And I had this little moment to myself where I said to myself, like, if you don't love this, if you don't go back to this and you don't love it, might be time to rethink, because the world was still in a very strange place. But I went back, I loved it, I was supported, and I proved to myself that I can do it. And then with my second, I did go back to work even quicker. I think I did a concert when she was 7 weeks old at the Wigmore, and then I went back and did a production of Così fan tutte at the Royal Opera House when she was 3 months old, which was intense. I'm not going to lie, it was intense, and there was a huge amount of planning that had to go into it. I had been at the Royal Opera House the autumn before when I was pregnant. So they knew what was coming. And they were so supportive, I've got to say. But I had to suddenly think of things like, I had to get a nanny with me. I was traveling in with the baby every day because I was breastfeeding, and she was so little. So I'd meet the nanny at the stage door, and they gave me a room right next door to our rehearsal studio. So I'd just go in and out at break times, quickly nurse her. And actually it worked really, really well. I've got to say, I was really, really well supported, but it was intense. And I think physically I was fine. After both births, I was really, really lucky, particularly with my second. It was actually like a beautiful home birth. And I did a lot of hypnobirthing beforehand to get myself mentally prepared. And I can't recommend that enough for the actual labour and the birthing. But then, to go back so quickly was it was a challenge.
Yeah.
It was a challenge, and it was the mental load. It was the memory.
The baby
I thought to
brain.
myself,
Oh my God,
Despina,
yeah.
that's not hard to sing, but the
brain.
So many
memory.
words.
The
Yeah.
memory thing was quite tricky, and I was saying to you earlier, Hannah, wasn't I, that I had to do our studio run on an hour and a half sleep.
Oh,
But it is amazing. But I did it.
Yeah, but this is the thing
did
we were
it.
saying earlier, is that many of you see it in people's eyes when you're discussing, what's it like, you see a certain fear in people who are considering this or thinking about or becoming parents. And what I always say is that you just find the reserves exist and
Yeah.
you find them.
It's amazing how people
It's
are so
incredible.
adaptable.
We are so
Our
adaptable.
brains and our
Yeah.
bodies can take a lot, actually, in
Absolutely.
extreme circumstances.
Well, and you flip it on your head, and like, of course, at the time it was slightly bonkers. But I look back on it now, and I'm so proud of that person who
absolutely,
did
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And you can be so proud of yourself as parents in this opera industry. Of course, it's hard, but what we do is amazing. And the fact that we're doing that with kids as well, because I remember thinking it was hard enough when I didn't have children.
Yes, yeah.
But now, actually, it's the pride you can have in yourself and what you can do is an amazing feeling. It gives you like this insane inner strength that you never knew you had.
Yeah. And I think also with regards to the physical stuff, a lot of questions that I get coming through are quite specific to cesarean as well, because I just wanted to mention there is a notion. Things have changed so much over the years, technology changing all the time. Questions like, is this going to cut through my support muscles? Is this going to cause me problems? How long is it going to take for me to build? But actually, depending on the situation, whether or not it's an emergency or not, I think my personal experience was that it was, although it is absolutely considered major surgery medically, it was absolutely done in a way that did not affect me in the long term in terms of support muscles. There are things that can happen along the way, but there's lots of help out there to ask about that. But for example, the days of sort of large scars from top to bottom, that it is a lot more refined now, and the idea of cutting through those muscles, forgive me, I don't know the exact anatomy of it, but it is absolutely possible with gentle care to prepare yourself. And I certainly was aware that I had something quite soon after my second birth whilst I was pregnant. So I just made sure that I was singing all the way through my pregnancy up to the end to make sure, little things like if you have something coming up, prepare. Even if you have to be in bed for those last few weeks, when you're, and they're kicking you and you're feeling uncomfortable, you can lie there and just be going over your words, because the more prepared and the more conscientious you can be about that, the more your brain can focus on the things at hand if that is happening. And on the flip side is that if it is not right for you, absolutely pull out.
Yes.
There is no problem whatsoever. If you are to say, I would like to do this, I think it might be possible, but I'm going to give myself the break to say, if it's not possible, I'm not going to do it. And they can and will find a cover. They will find someone else to do it, and to release that guilt, because the most important thing is taking care of yourself physically and psychologically. Anna, I saw you nodding along there when I was talking about cesarean. So I know you have something.
Yeah, so
to share
I had
there.
a cesarean. My baby was breech, and
Could you
so
just quickly describe, what breech means, just for people who are
so
listening who don't?
feet first,
Feet
basically.
first,
Obviously,
yeah.
it's supposed to be head first, and it was feet first.
Very, very common.
Yeah, and also they did try to turn her as well, and that didn't work. But so it wasn't what was planned, but I have to say the actual cesarean was a lovely experience, because it ends up being planned, so it's not an emergency. But so when I had the cesarean, I was actually quite numb where the scar was, and I did go back to work 10 weeks after I did Op Holland Park and did the Young Artist program, and it was amazing. So she would come to rehearsals and things, and they were extremely supportive. But yeah, I did feel like my voice dropped a bit, and as a mezzo, that's probably a good thing. But I felt like I'd lost a bit of connection with my support because of that numbness. But I had amazing, support from a teacher, and also just went and had some physio and worked out finding that low engagement again, and it was fine. I had a little break after doing that contract, which I think was great. But I think important to say, when people are worried about going back to work quickly after having a child, your voice is not going to disappear. Like, it's going to be there. Yes, things might change a bit, but I mean, everybody I've spoken to, it's always been for the better, if anything, to be honest. And it's not going to harm you having a year off, and you have to do what's best for you. And as you touched on, to be honest, it is more of that mental load. I found that the hardest thing. My daughter was really poorly as well, so that dealing with that in and out of hospital whilst trying to sing and build a career was hard. But with the support network and a company like Opera Holland Park, I mean, it was all totally possible. They're doing really well. I mean, it's like hashtag Opera Holland Park.
Jenny, you were going to mention about the vocal aspect.
Yeah, the voice change thing is something that I get asked a lot as well, because I'm a coloratura soprano. Where our bread and butter is high notes, right? And I'm not going to lie, about 6 months ago, I was feeling a little lost, mentally, but also vocally. And I think I have lost maybe a semitone at the very top. And as a coloratura, that was quite scary.
Very scary.
And certain bits of repertoire, particularly contemporary stuff that I do a lot of, just wasn't feeling as comfortable anymore. But what I've done in the last few years, particularly since having my children, is that I have got a really great teacher that I trust, that I go to regularly as I possibly could. When I came out of college, I didn't really have many singing lessons. You kind of go steam, straight ahead onto the career. Now it's super important, I think, just to go and check in with somebody to hear you. And what I've found is that I think some of it is to do with having my children and the hormonal changes, of course, but a lot of it is to do with age.
Yeah.
Which applies to you as well, David. As you get older, your voice changes. It's not something we can shy away from. So I don't think it's just to do with having children. And actually what I found is my voice is fleshing out a little bit. And now I just had to get into the mindset of, okay, maybe I have to say goodbye to a couple of roles that I have loved and have served me really well. But I think I'm finding now that, for example, this Lucia that I'm preparing at the moment and doing is a much better fit for me. And I'm now getting really excited about the next chapter and about what different repertoire that can open up to, because there is always something.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting because you touched on, again, this idea, this huge, wide topic of identity. And we lose our identity in so many ways during parenthood, because suddenly you're one thing and now you're this, and you're stretching yourself. And if I had quite a lot of time out of singing. I had a couple of periods in my career where I felt like, well, I'm not going to do this anymore. And this question of who am I if I'm not a singer? And the same applies to Fach, right? Because your voice can very well change. I used to be a soprano and now I'm a mezzo-soprano. And I would say with both of the both children that I've had after the birth, my voice has for want of a better word, blossomed and gotten, say, fruitier and certainly lower. And I personally feel, and this is just my experience, that I am arriving at a place with my voice that it was always going to be, and that it was never going to be any sooner and never going to be any later, and that the birth of my two children has absolutely been a part of that, as alongside all of the hormones and our age and coming towards a certain time in our lives.
Life shapes you,
and life shapes you.
We are, as singers, our bodies are
This is a simple question of physiology, of course. I mean, we can talk all we want about our voices getting fruitier and lower. What we're talking about is the vocal folds getting thicker.
Right.
That's what's actually happening,
happens with
and that
age
happens naturally with age. It's also affected by the hormones that come from childbirth, of course, but that can in some cases be temporary, and some cases not so temporary. But it happens with age anyway. That's exactly the point.
And the emotional, just to touch on, to bring you in, David, as well, into the conversation of how parenthood changes the voice and might change your performance generally, is that the emotional impact of having children. Perhaps people talk about bringing something different, the sound, or having that emotional connection with the voice, and perhaps playing certain roles that you have a direct connection to in a different sort of way, but also just becoming a parent. A lot of just to completely dispel this idea that it's all really difficult and it's all really hard. A lot of people talk about this enormous emotional freedom connected to their singing, because quite simply, you have something more important than your singing career in the world.
Absolutely.
And so, David, is this something that you found?
I suppose so, although again, it's difficult to separate the having children aspect from your natural career development in terms of timing. It's difficult to know what's cause and what's effect. But I do definitely now feel, in the last 7 or 8 years since I had children, more freedom and confidence, whether that's related to the fact that I have something more, I have other things that I'm thinking about all the time, or whether it's related to just confidence that comes from practice and success. I mean, I'm not really sure, but definitely I would say that whether you're a parent or not, that it's definitely healthy to not be 100% focused and not be putting pressure on yourself as a performer. The less pressure that you feel as a performer, the better performer you become.
Yeah.
That's certainly true.
And also, just sort of to segue into our next talking point, whilst we're talking about the freedoms that come, there is, I really, really feel we ought to talk about the financial pressures. And of course, whilst you have this wonderful feeling of, oh, there's something more important in the world, there is also the undeniable extra pressure of actually, perhaps I have to do this contract. Perhaps I really need to do well in this audition because I have children to feed now and I have a mortgage to pay and all of these things and a roof over their heads. And so I don't know how much that's impacted. It's certainly been at the forefront of my mind a lot of the time.
I mean,
those extra pressures.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I certainly feel that now that I had a slightly unusual situation in that my international career really started to take off exactly at the same time as I had children. So what's happened over those years inevitably is that my outgoings have dramatically increased, And now, of course, I feel that that I need to keep working at the same level in order to
Yeah.
fund those
Right.
increased outgoings.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy for me to say, oh, I'm in a fortunate position, I can pick and choose my work a little bit more, maybe I'll take a couple of months off. Well, that's fine, but the household outgoings don't go down
There's
in that time.
repercussions. Yeah.
So, so then it becomes, if you're not careful, it can become a sort of vicious circle where you're spending more money because you're working, but you also need to keep working in order to
Yeah.
pay those bills.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It's-
there
it's
are
that
there are
balance.
fantastic resources for us. We've got the tax-free childcare.
We need to talk about the practicalities.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've mentioned.
So there's the tax-free childcare. There's the
Just mention what that is, Jenny.
So that is where it's a scheme. You sign up, and essentially, if you for every £8 you put into the kitty, the government will top it up with £2.
So it's a 20% top up
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
government, which you can find on the government website.
Exactly.
gov.uk.
It's and that's how I pay for all of my childcare.
And you put your money in, and then the government top it up, and you pay like a bank account from them to the childcare.
And it can be nurseries, but also childminders and nannies
Yes, well, I
as
was going
well.
to say about nurseries, because I think I've certainly found we've used a fantastic childminder for both my girls. The baby is currently there, because I found that with our scheduling
Yeah.
and our life and the way that we work, obviously we're away a lot, and then when we're home. And nurseries don't suit that because you have to pay up front for 52 weeks a year.
Yeah,
And they're very
they're
expensive.
and the
less
hours are
flexible.
fixed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I've found the flexibility of a childminder
Very, very important
is
point. Yeah.
is the only way that we could really do it.
We did both, actually. We did the first one, we did nursery, which was very fixed, and then the second time we did childminder, and we wondered why we hadn't before.
Yeah, the
As I,
flexibility is brilliant.
Okay, now
as I will
feel
say,
need to change.
well, this is perfect. Well,
Yeah.
because I say to everybody, it's so personal. If you're
Yes.
happy
Yeah.
and you found someone you trust, ultimately it's about finding the place where your child is happiest and you
Yeah,
feel most
yeah.
comfortable.
I think my husband also, he works in the West End, so his
Right.
work is very regular. So his days are regular.
Well,
so
then this is
it kind
great
of
for you.
works, and then I'm,
Yeah.
a bit more all over the
Okay.
place.
And then there's the statutory maternity pay, and which is not great.
No.
It's
Oh.
not great.
And
I am
it's-
quite jealous of like some of my
Particularly not if you're
friends who have
self-employed, you know.
exactly
Yes.
friends who have like actual maternity
Yeah.
pay and maternity leave, and they kind of talk about having 9 months to a year
Yeah.
off and being paid for it. I'm like, that sounds nice.
Yeah. It is.
It's not great,
It's
no.
quite
It's not
pathetic,
great.
really, just in terms of
It makes it difficult.
It does make
It puts the
quite
pressure on to
difficult.
go back to work.
Yeah.
I would say.
To either to go back to work or just to sort of have to make that decision to stay at home and not be able to afford childcare at all.
Yeah.
When you get there, when you're ready to sort of have childcare, there was one point in the early days with my first where we figured out that the childcare for just a few days a week was just practically more than what we were paying for our mortgage. So this is something that is a government issue that is constantly being reviewed and looked at. But having said that, to flip to the positives and looking at how things are changing, it used to be with my first daughter that she would get her free childcare hours, which is where the government gives you 15 or 30 hours free childcare. It used to be that she would have to be two or three,
I think it was
3 years
3.
old, and they've changed it to 9 months,
Yeah.
which
Starting
is
September,
a
yeah.
game changer.
It
So
is.
with my second, she hit 9 months and we were able to get 15 hours, and
Yeah.
it's means tested 15 or 30, and that makes an enormous difference
Yeah.
for us, for the economy. Not to get too political, but that's been an enormous help. Have you found that?
Yeah. When the 30 hours came in, we were
It's a game
get
changer.
her in another day at
Yeah.
nursery.
Yeah.
It's really amazing. We actually also had a live-in au pair, which I don't know
Oh,
if
very
anybody
nice,
else has
Never
had.
yeah.
did that. I was interested in it.
Yeah, and it was amazing.
Yeah, I know a lot of
mean,
musicians that have done that.
yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
a lot cheaper than a nanny, and it was amazing having someone that's from a different culture. And my daughter loved her; they were like best friends. And my husband was working away; I was at Glyndebourne, so it was like a tough period. And she was just a constant, and that's what was great. And she still lives in London, and we see her all the time. But yeah, I would definitely recommend that
Yeah.
to people.
Brilliant. Okay. I'm just like to just mention a couple of quotes here that we've had from our lovely submissions. I just want to mention the storytelling aspect of performance and childcare, and we thought this was a particularly nice submission. Having a priority other than my own voice and performance is a hugely important thing for a performer. If you are to portray life, empathy, love, devotion, self-sacrifice for another, all these things were made crystal clear when I had a child, and I feel it has become easier to portray more convincingly on stage. That's quite an interesting point. That's not to say that people who choose not to have children can't portray these things, but in my situation, it informed me a lot about life, love, and realism. So I just, going back to the point that we just said before, I just wanted to sort of get that in there. But just quickly going back to the support in terms of finance, family. If you are lucky enough to call on family, my personal experience has been fantastic in that I have a very, very, my mum does quite a lot for us. We know that we have a couple of people that we can call on in an emergency. My younger brother is really hands-on with my children, and I know that I'm very fortunate in that. But there are plenty of people who don't have that. So just making sure that people are aware that there is help out there to ask for it, making sure you go to the sort of relevant services. There are services out there, NHS services, that if you're struggling or you're not sure where to go and who to turn to, I think it's really important that we mention that, to just ask your local service affiliated with hospitals and GPs and things like that, that there is help if you ask for it. Have you guys had some family help along the way?
We're in a slightly awkward situation in the sense that we're not far from my parents. They're about an hour and a half away, but that hour and a half can feel like forever.
Yeah.
And then my husband's family are all in Canada. So we don't actually have much of a support network right by us, which, to be honest, over the years has been a bit of an issue. But I will say that as particularly my eldest has gotten older and gone to school, I mentioned it earlier, but creating your own support network and your own family and your own village is possible. I've got some incredible friends, and for example, this evening my daughter is going on a play date after school, and when I'm away, a load of my friends rally around and help my husband as much as possible, which is a really, really wonderful thing. I've also got 2 teenage stepchildren, so I've actually got 4 kids, to be honest, and I've known them since they were really little, but they're now 17 and nearly 15, and they're a great help sometimes. Like when we're all together.
Free
childcare. Maybe not free, but it is. And the girls, like my girls, absolutely adore them. There is nothing kind of half about them. They are they are siblings, and that's been a really beautiful thing as well. And as I said, they are a huge help. So you don't have to, if you don't have your own family around you, it shouldn't put you off from having children, because you can create your own village.
And whilst we're just talking about those things, it's really, I really wanted to talk today about this idea of family-friendly practices within opera companies, because, again, I really feel that it is changing, but there are more changes that can be made. The impact, whilst we're talking about childcare and the expense of it, the extraordinary expense of it, and the unbelievable scheduling, like military precision scheduling when it comes to, figuring out what you're going to do if one of you is away, things like that, the impact of last minute changes in schedules and things like that, and the cost of that. Just to start off with a positive, I worked for English Touring Opera last autumn, and we had the wonderful Olivia Fuchs was directing, and she found that a colleague and mine were both parents, and she made a beeline for me and said, I just wanted to give you this long-term schedule just to make sure and I'm going to be really aware, and I'm going to be really sensitive to the fact that we're going to try and not change the schedule. And for me, on day one, the relief just left my the stress just left my body in that moment, because you're always thinking, oh my gosh, it is absolutely the prerogative of the company to change the schedule because things happen. And it's really important to remember that you are, again, a really small cog in an enormous machine. My husband works as an in-house director at the Royal Opera House, and he deals a lot with schedules. So I've seen it from both sides. There is so much that goes into planning and scheduling, and so we must be aware of that. But there are such tiny things that can be done
Yeah.
in order to make your life more manageable and less stressful, but B, so that you're actually walking away with some of your fee.
Yeah.
Because last minute changes for contracts for me in the past, really consistent last minute changes have cost me my fee in general, because I have paid all of it to last minute emergency childcare. You're all nodding. David?
Sure. I mean, I work, it's a little bit different because I work 90% of my work is abroad,
Right.
I would say. But it's worse in that it's better in that it doesn't affect my childcare costs.
Right.
So, I mean, we're in a very fortunate position. We have a nanny who we've had for almost 8 years, who lives down the road, who's like part of our family, who's absolutely amazing. And she essentially is adaptable. I mean, we always plan everything in advance. Obviously, last minute changes to my schedule tend not to make a difference to childcare because I'm away anyway.
Yeah.
That's the thing. But that said, it should be noted that in most major European opera companies, you don't even get a schedule until the previous afternoon per day.
Quite different. Yeah.
So the routine sort of scheduling in Germany is that between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. you get emailed the schedule for tomorrow, and so there is no planning. You can't do any planning at all. You just have to assume that you're rehearsing all the time.
Yeah.
The only thing I can say that you can do, which I have started doing more recently, and it's really paying off, is that if you go and you are super prepared, always be super prepared, and if you don't go with any kind of expectations, but you're nice about it.
Yes.
I've started going, and either before I get somewhere or certainly within the first couple of days, I have started asking if I can possibly have weekends off, for example.
Yeah.
So I was just in Paris earlier this year, and they were very, very nice about it. They understood my position. I'd done the show before. It was a revival, but it was quite a short period of, we had a lot to fit in. But I said to them, look, I've got kids at home. Is there any possibility of not working Saturdays? And they were completely understanding. And it was quite shocking. I think if you don't ask, you don't get sometimes. And of course, I've asked the question and been told, no, absolutely not.
Course, yeah.
But
which is fair enough.
It's happening more and more that if you do ask, so just knowing that you are going to have Saturdays off every week, that meant I could fly home every Friday night. And often we started in Paris anyway, we started a bit later on a Monday, so I could fly even Monday morning, and it was a game changer. And I will hashtag Opera Holland Park again. I'm going to mention it again because Opera Holland Park do this incredible thing. It's the only place I've worked that does this. You get a advance schedule over a month before you start rehearsals, and that's for the first 3 weeks of rehearsals, and they are not allowed to change it. Sometimes I've actually had a bit more time off, like I've had a couple of hours extra off, but if you are not called to a session, they can't call you. And as far as planning your life goes, that is an absolute game changer. And what we found in the room, it's been going so well because everybody is prepared. Everybody knows what we're doing on a certain day, so you can prepare for that particular scene. And the production team as well it's been seamless because they have to do a little bit of work earlier, but it means that everyone's come on day one like ready to go. We're not doing any weekends, so I get to go home at the weekends. It's just, honestly, it's they are proving that it can be done, and I think it really should be a model that more opera companies take on, because you get the best out of your performers when we're allowed to be who we are as well. We are not just, this is not all we do. Most of us, even if you don't have children, you've got a life, and it all adds to what you produce on stage. And I think particularly the weekend thing, nobody wants to be rehearsing on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, I know. I absolutely agree. I mean, I do think, depending on the company, sometimes I know that it's absolutely necessary to rehearse on a Saturday for various different reasons, for different things.
Particularly when you're working with children.
Yes,
in a show.
exactly. For example, and also just in terms of director styles of rehearsing, finding things in the room, new productions of things, perhaps everything. We have to be malleable. It's a fact of the profession that we do have to be malleable to this idea that I'm really sorry that you're going to have to come in, and this is last minute. But there are many professions, and this might be just the nub of the idea that we're not quite ready for yet, even though it'd be wonderful to start seeing in certain opera companies that if there was some kind of creche facility, for example, or some kind of I don't know, emergency childcare sort of pathway or anything like that, particularly for people with really young children. For me, if somebody asked me as an advocate of SWOPRA, of supporting women and parents in opera, if somebody asked me what would be a really huge, enormous step and game-changing step forward, it would be the idea of having that sort of some kind of conversation within the company about, okay, this last-minute change, not sure how I'm going to manage this. What about this? Is there a nanny you can recommend that is associated to the company?
Yeah.
Just being able to have your kids there
Yeah.
in emergency situations.
Which almost feels, I'm going to be honest, I'm sitting here and I'm almost sort of nervous to bring that up. I feel anxious to bring it up because I feel as though this profession absolutely is about, there's still an element of just absolutely coming and doing the best job you can and thank you and the gratitude aspect. And it's such a competitive, world and all of these things. But actually, there are so many high-level professions that have these sorts of things inbuilt into their companies, and it's absolutely something that can be looked at. I would really like to just sort of step away from the those sort of difficulties, and just finish on talking about the joyful side of performance and singing, and how we might like to pass on the love of music and opera, how having our children in the audience is quite special, and I've got a funny story of my daughter came to watch me sing at Buxton Opera House, and she'd never seen me on stage before, and when I came out it was all silent, and I walked up on stage and she shouted "Mummy!" from the sort of fourth row back, which is a really, really special experience. And I don't know about you guys, but have you had your children come and see you in things? Or Anna, you're nodding. And
My daughter came to ENO for my debut in a relaxed performance, which was really, really nice. And I met her backstage at stage door afterwards, and she was like, "Your dress, it's so beautiful. And is that your real hair?" All these. And I mean, apparently she did get a bit bored, even though it was Pirates of Penzance.
Oh,
but
fair enough.
she couldn't believe that I was up there and dancing around and singing. So yeah, she absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And she actually watched her first opera at Opera Holland Park at a relaxed performance. And I've got this little video of her at the end, because it was quite early, because I think it was she hadn't learnt to clap, but she clapped, and she was clapping so hard. She thought they were all
really
clapping for her. Yeah, she was really little. And she just couldn't believe it. She was looking around really, really excited. And she sat there and watched it and loved it. So
that's such a fun story. Learning to clap for the first time as your mother's on stage. Yeah, that's wonderful. David, you must have had the kids. They're a bit older, aren't they?
It's a bit different because, as I say,
You're abroad.
90% of the time I'm not at home when I'm performing. So neither of mine have actually been to an opera, a whole one. They've popped into bits of rehearsals and things. I was very, very lucky 2 years ago to be asked to do the ENO Horrible Histories prom.
Oh, fun.
Which they all came to, all my family, and that was amazing because that was the best of both worlds in a way. I got to do my job, but it was also genuinely fun for the kids.
Oh, that's lovely. Massive thanks to the National Opera Studio, and thank you so much to my absolutely fantastic guests, Anna Cooper, David Buchan and Jennifer France, for coming to this fantastic podcast.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thanks.